the MG Maestro Turbo, which is the real king of the 90s hot hatches. So for those of you new to the channel, I'm going to give you a summary of the car, a wee walk round. I'm going to give you a background on all the restoration work that's taken place over the last 11 years. I'm going to tell you what I've done in 2024 so far and then what I plan to do. My name's Chris and welcome to Retro Ratchet. So for those of you not familiar with the MG Maestro, there was 505 turbos built. This is a later one on a 1990. They were fitted with Austin Rover's 2-litre O-Series engine. It was an 8-valve head on those, obviously turbocharged. It's also got an intercooler, and this one's sitting on 83,000 miles, which I think is reasonably low. The car was actually originally British Racing Green, my least favourite of the 4 colours that they made them in. When the car was stripped, I decided it was going to be a keeper, so I'd done a full colour change to black. Just before I bought it, it had undergone a partial restoration and a full respray, but the quality of that I wasn't really that happy with. So 3 years later, I decided to strip the car down and start addressing any of the areas of rust that I found. There was some welding that wasn't too great on the sills, and one thing led to another, and the whole car got stripped down to a bare shell. And then fast forward to 2018, a redundancy and a house move, so the project stopped. I picked the project back up again in May 2020 when I had a new house with a suitable garage. And then the following 3 years, I got back into it, the welding, the engine rebuilds, got the whole car reassembled, resprayed, MOT'd and back on the road. Right, let's take a wee look under the bonnet where a lot of money's been spent on this. Right, so there we have it. Engine bay on these is a little bit cluttered and you can never make them really look that tidy even when they're all restored. But what we've done with this one is full engine rebuild. So the pistons were replaced with new old stock oversized ones, obviously with new rings as well. There was wear on the original pistons, the actual ringlands, there was actually play up and down in them. So they were irreparable. It would either have had to have been a Ford set or a new old stock set, which I was very lucky to find. The bottom end, it's still the original bottom end, tend to be quite strong on these, so it was just all the bearings and shells that were replaced. The cylinder head is standard, that had a full rebuild. The turbo was sent away, that also had a full rebuild. The carburetor, I stripped down, got a rebuild kit and done that myself because these are pretty straightforward. Radiator hasn't been replaced. Carb cooling fan is original. The gearbox was sent away and that's had a very detailed rebuild. I think nearly every bearing was replaced in that box, so that is like brand new. I used the original drive shafts, original ECU, I got a new fuel pressure regulator, new coil, original vapour separator. Power steering rack was sent away, that had a professional rebuild as well. And new header tank, and that took some finding. That actually came from abroad. So there was so many things have been replaced. Originally had upgraded red Samco intercooler hoses. I've managed to source some original ones now because I preferred the look of those. It's got a non-standard intercooler on it because when I got the car it had been tweaked a little bit. So it had the intercooler, it had the bigger exhaust, and it had the boost turned up a little bit, and it was rolling roaded at about 175 brake. So nothing too wild, and the engine coped with that fine. These hoses I've replaced. These are obviously aftermarket, but they're kind of similar. The originals didn't have these white ribs on them, but I think it works out quite well. So all in all, mechanically, under here should be sorted. Okay, let's take a wee look around the bodywork. So, black from British Racing Green. It's obviously had a full respray. So, not all the doors are original. This was a replacement door I actually got years ago. I've done a little bit of welding down into that corner there. The other 3 doors were on the car when I got it. I'm not sure if they're original. So I also replaced the 2 front wings. It's on its original bonnet and body kit. In terms of structure, new outer sills, new rear quarters. The inner arches, I've fabricated quite a lot of repair sections in them, and the same goes for the floor. The little jacking points that go out to the sills, I've fabricated new ones of those, along with inner sill repair sections. So moving round to the rear, it's got its original tailgate and spoilers on there. I was fortunate enough about 10 years ago to actually find a full rear panel, and they're really, really hard to come by. So they come around and then they go into the boot a little bit, so I welded that in as well. Passenger side, identical to the driver's side, cut out the outer arch, replaced that, fabricated repair sections for the inner. These were the original British Racing Green ones. These have actually just been resprayed. They originally had the red inserts in them, and I got some new red decals made up, which I think really set it off. Roof, so I actually done quite a bit of welding on the roof. I cut out right the way along there. It rotted where the windscreen sits, probably letting water into the car, which accounts for the rotten floors. But yeah, I got a repair panel off a scrap car, so just cut straight the way along, welded right the way along very slowly, and that's seamless. You can't even see that repair now, so really happy with that. These A-pillars, there's various little repairs I've done on there as well. The scuttle is not the original scuttle. Again, I got that off a scrap car that was in much better condition and welded that in. We're on the original bonnet and grille and bumper. You can't really get the bumpers for these anymore. They're just completely not obtainable. It's sitting on its original wheels. I've just had some new tyres fitted as well. Right, moving on to the interior. This is probably where I've spent the least amount of time restoring it. So this is exactly as it is. The original seats, well, actually that's a lie. This is not the original seat. This is actually an MG Metro seat. And you can tell that because it has a little release handle round that side. So if anybody happens to have a driver's side one of those, please let me know. I have some material for having the red retrimmed onto there, and they're a little bit worse for wear. But to be fair, they're not actually in too bad condition when you look at the bolsters and stuff. They do need a good clean. I've not gotten around to doing that yet. So carpets are actually in decent condition. They actually just need a clean. The door trims, they're not too bad. The material is getting a little bit loose on those, but luckily they're not ripped because all these things are very hard to find. It has the typical crack along the dashboard there that a lot of these have, and then the dash spreads out up that way. And that's very, very hard to do anything about, so I'm leaving that for the moment. The steering wheel, you can see a wee bit of wear on the leather, but again, I've left that for the moment till I figure out what I'm going to do. The headlining, that was actually done about 10 years ago before I took the car off the road. I'd done that myself, and the back of that actually got damaged there when it was in the body shop, so I need to repair the biscuit because that's dropped down somewhat. Right, the most exciting part, how does it drive? Well, we've only done 543 miles since the rebuild, so the engine's not fully run in yet, so I'm going to wait till it's 1,000 miles before I really give it some beans. So it's going to be a lukewarm drive today, unfortunately. No redlining in each gear at the moment anyway. So naturally these don't handle particularly well. They're very, very wallowy. This is just running standard suspension as well. Obviously all the bushes and things have been replaced, but still it's not a tight handling car. But in my opinion, it does sound lovely when that boost kicks in. These are fitted with the 5-speed PG1 gearbox in them. You know, it's a decent gearbox, to be fair, and like I said, this has been rebuilt, so it is like a brand new gearbox. There's no wear, no noises whatsoever, but it was a pretty costly job to get it like that. And when you're driving it, you notice everything is very, very light. The accelerator pedal, the clutch, which is obviously brand new, the brakes, they bite right at the top of the pedal. They were all replaced as well. Stopping power is not impressive either. So engine runs spot on, I think, at the moment. I haven't had it on a rolling road, obviously, because it's not yet run in. So these were originally 150 brake horsepower, and I think fastest in their class. They were sub 7 seconds to 60, gather 6.7 or 6.9. So really lively, you know, for the very late 80s. And that was mostly because of the torque. And you notice now in a bumpy road, yeah, it's just up and down and up and down. The dampers are not the dampers are not controlling the car as well as a modern car does, that's for sure. But yeah, I think once it's run in, it'll be interesting to take it on a rolling road, check the fueling's correct, and see if it is putting out that 175 horsepower. So you see there, even short shifting, it goes along pretty well, I think. Just don't fly too fast into the corners in one of these, unless you have your suspension upgraded. These Toyo tyres though, they've made it a real difference to the road holding, which you would expect. It was just a cheap budget set that was put on it years ago before it came off road for its restoration. So I didn't have high expectations for them anyway, but yeah, they seem like quite a soft compound. There's quite a lot of movement in the tyre wall, but these are a lot better. How cool is that? It sounds mint. Okay, so regrets. Now's probably a good time to talk about what I would do differently if I started all over again. Well, the first and most obvious one is do the project and complete it a lot faster than how many ever years that took. You know, we're 11 years on and it's only just back on the road. So yeah, get my finger out and get it completed a lot faster. Point number 2, underbody. So the underbody is actually painted. I never bothered undersealing it or putting stone chip on. I just put layers and layers of black paint. I think it was Corusol was the brand. Anyway, after a year, it's not as glossy as it was, and I'm kind of regretting it now and maybe thinking it should have probably been a better quality underbody paint job that was done in it. But we can't go back now really and start again with that. But it does look pretty decent. There's only a couple of spots I need to touch up where there's been stone chips, but to be fair, the car doesn't really get used that much. But yeah, I would certainly reconsider that and take a different approach if I was doing that again. So on to point number 3. I think I would probably get a better quality paint job than I did. There's a few little bits and pieces you won't be able to make out in the camera unless you're right up against the car, which could certainly have been improved the way the paint has been applied, but we won't go into all the details on that. And the last part is under the bonnet. So let's take another look under here. And this will become apparent when we take some close-ups of the engine. So the thing that stands out to me the most after it's been on the road for a year is some of the bolts are rusty. The ones I've painted, rust is coming through, and it's really, really letting down this engine bay. Obviously, head bolts there, stuff like that. So that's really irritating to see like these clips. So I think in retrospect, the best plan would have been have those electroplated. Got them all in order, electroplate them and put them back on, and they probably wouldn't have been rusting like they are now. They'd be this probably lovely goldish colour. And one thing that is coming back to bite me on that decision is the pulleys, and it's taken me a while to figure out what's actually going on here. So the power steering pulley is I'm constantly getting squeaking off that belt. I had painted it and the belt didn't like it, so what I've done is I stripped all the paint back off, and now you can see rust starting to form. it's going on the belt, and I think it's making the belt slip even worse than it was before. So they really are going to have to be taken off and electroplated, I would say, and then refitted with a new belt. Otherwise, I'm always going to have a squeaky power steering belt, which is not great. So yeah, and that wraps it up for regrets. So I mean, not too bad. And I think a decade's passed, your approach changes, your experience changes, you know what has worked and what has not worked. But overall, not really that bad.